They told us that education was the key to freedom. So why do so many of us still feel stuck? They said school was about learning, a place where your mind would expand, where ideas would spark, and where you discover who you really are. But let's be real, how much of what you learned in school do you actually remember today? Not the facts or the dates, but the meaning behind them. The truth is, school was never really about learning, it was about remembering. Remembering what someone else decided was important, holding on to it just long enough to pass the test, and then letting it go forever. We started mistaking performance for understanding and memorization for wisdom, and somewhere along the way, we lost the one thing that made learning magical: our curiosity. As kids, we asked why 100 times a day, but by the time we finished school, we were scared to even raise our hand. What changed? We were taught that having the right answer mattered more than asking the right question, that making a mistake meant you failed, not that you were learning, that your intelligence was a number, not a journey. And when a child starts believing that being wrong is dangerous, not part of the process, that child stops exploring, stops questioning, and stops thinking. That's the big illusion, that just because we sat in classrooms, we were growing. But truth is, many of us were shrinking, quietly, slowly, trying to fit into boxes we were never meant to fit. We learned how to sit still, follow rules, and give the answers they wanted even when we knew they weren't the whole truth. We weren't being taught to think, we were being trained to obey, because the system doesn't reward those who think differently. It rewards those who can repeat things on command. And maybe that's why today we have trouble making choices without someone else's approval. Why we look for permission to chase what we love. Why we wait for life to hand us a grade. The betrayal wasn't just in what they taught us. It was in everything they made us keep quiet. Our questions, our doubts, our voice. That wasn't real education. That was programming. And the first real step toward learning is realizing you've been tricked. You might believe school was built to educate you, but that's only part of the story. The truth is, the modern school system wasn't created to grow thinkers. It was created to build workers. Back in the 19th and 20th centuries, when factories were taking off and industries needed order, structure, and obedience, a new kind of school system was born. And it wasn't based on a library. It was based on a factory. Rows of desks, bells to start and end the day, subjects chopped up by the hour, uniforms to erase individuality, one person talking, everyone else listening. This wasn't about opening minds, it was about running smoothly. The goal was simple: train people to follow instructions, stay in line, and produce, not question. So schools became assembly lines, not for knowledge, but for obedience. You were taught when to speak, when to stay quiet, when to move, when to freeze. Not because it helped your mind, but because it helped the system run easier. This is what a factory-style mind looks like. A mind trained to favor routine over curiosity, results over passion, and obedience over thinking for yourself. And the saddest part, it actually worked. Millions left school knowing how to stick to a schedule, hit deadlines, and complete tasks. But they had no clue how to ask real questions, how to solve problems without clear answers, or how to deal with a world full of uncertainty. They became solid workers, but unsure people. They learned how to meet other people's standards, but forgot how to set their own. That's the true cost of this system. It doesn't just limit what you know, it reshapes who you are. It teaches you that your worth depends on what you produce, that mistakes mean failure, that stepping out of line is dangerous, not powerful. But here's the truth. No brilliant mind in history ever reached greatness by playing it safe. They challenged the rules. They questioned the system. They broke boundaries because they realized the system was broken. And we need to realize that too. Because the world today doesn't need more factory-style minds. It needs free ones. Just imagine this. A child who can build entire worlds out of cardboard and string, but can't pass a math test. Another who can tell moving powerful stories but gets told to focus more on science, or the kid who can't sit still in class, but can repair a broken radio in minutes. In most schools, these kids aren't seen as talented. They're seen as troublemakers, slackers, failures. Why? Because our education system only recognizes a narrow kind of intelligence. If you're not good at math, science, or reading in the exact way they want, you're considered less than. But the real truth is this intelligence isn't one thing. There's creative intelligence, emotional intelligence, technical, musical, social, spatial intelligence too, but most of those never show up on a report card. Howard Gardner once shared the idea of multiple bold belief that people are smart in all kinds of different ways, but that idea never made it past the walls of school, because it's hard to create a test for diversity. It's tough to measure imagination. You can't put a number on soul, so the system picks the easier path. It ignores all of it. And little by little, students start to think the only kind of intelligence that matters is the one they don't have. That's how gifts turn into shame. How being different starts to feel like being wrong. How whole generations grow up believing they're not smart just because nobody ever looked at their talents the right way. This is how real intelligence dies. Not because it's gone, but because we were never allowed to see it. And what's even worse, a lot of the successful students, the ones who aced the tests, followed every rule, and earned all the praise they grew up terrified of failing, scared to think outside the box, because their whole sense of worth came from someone else's approval. So in the end, it's not just the misfits the system hurts. It hurts the rule followers too. It creates a world where nobody really wins, where true intelligence gets lost under all the standardizing, where raw brilliance gets replaced with structure. But let's be clear, the mind you were born with, it's still there, just waiting for you to stop measuring it with someone else's ruler. You probably remember your grades more than the lessons, the red pen marks, the quiet judgment, that sinking feeling in your chest when your test came back with a number that felt more like a sentence than a score. They told us those numbers showed how smart we were, but what they really did was shape how we saw ourselves. From the very beginning, we were taught that if you do well in school, you matter. If you don't, you're somehow less. So we started chasing gold stars instead of chasing questions, looking for approval instead of seeking real understanding, trying to be perfect instead of trying to grow. But here's the twist. Even the students who got straight A's, many of them, are still carrying wounds. Because when your self-worth depends on someone else's praise, you become trapped by it. You avoid risks, because even one failure might break the image. You play it safe, because the system made you believe that mistakes are something to fear. That's the quiet pain behind success. The imposter feeling that lives in top performers. The fear that one day, someone will see you're not as smart as they think. And for those who didn't do well in school, the scars are different. But just as deep, many go through life feeling like they missed their moment, like there's something broken inside them, like they're forever behind in a race they never agreed to run. They start to believe failure is just who they are, and they give up not because they don't have potential, but because they were told they never did. That's what happens when a system mistakes performance for potential. It creates two kinds of prisoners: the ones too scared to fall, and the ones who were never given the chance to rise, both stuck in the same mental trap, built by years of ranking, comparing, and quiet shame. But here's the truth the system never said out loud: you are not your test scores, you are not your GPA, and you're not falling behind. You were just measured by the wrong standards. Because real success isn't about being perfect, it's about the guts to keep going when nothing makes sense. And when you realize that, you start to take back the power the system tried to strip away. If everything until now has felt like a betrayal, that's because it was. But betrayal isn't the final chapter. It's the start of something stronger, reclaiming. Because once you see the system for what it is, it can't control you anymore. The truth is, Your mind doesn't need anyone's permission to wake up. It just needs a little quiet to ask, what do I truly want to learn? Because real learning was never supposed to be forced. It was supposed to be felt, lived, chased with fire. Just look around. The most powerful minds today aren't the ones who followed the rules. They're the ones who broke free. They taught themselves. They challenged what they were told. They let curiosity lead the way. They created their own kind of learning, one mistake, one obsession, one late-night rabbit hole at a time. This is the unlearning revolution. It's about letting go of the lies that intelligence can be scored, that success has one path, that your worth comes from being compliant, and instead remembering the truth that your mind is untamed, that curiosity is a gift, that no system can define your worth unless you let it. This revolution doesn't start with noise. It starts in stillness. When you read because something calls you, when you question what doesn't sit right, when you chase an idea, not for a grade, but because it won't let go. That's real learning. That's real power. And it's waiting just outside the lines they told you to stay inside. If something in this message lit a spark, don't let it burn out. Share this with someone who feels trapped in a system that never truly saw them. And if you're ready to begin your unlearning journey, hit subscribe and stay close. Because we're building something new here. Not a class, not a course, a space, a movement, a gathering of minds ready to truly think. Because in a world that taught you to stay asleep, waking up is the boldest rebellion of all.